Bonjour.
Bonjour.
So we are in a series of studying the Nobel Laureates. So we have covered the first 50 years in our previous video. So we are going to cover the next 50 years in this video. So don't forget to watch till the end. So let's start with that.
Yeah, so before beginning into the session, I'll just quote something.
Okay.
Someone like an American poet for that matter. So I quote, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." So this is a quotation or a poetic line said by Robert Frost in his poem "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening." And through this quotation, I like we can find literal meaning where the speaker is like wants to do his job before he dies or leaves the world. Like, no matter how beautiful the world is, we have to do our work before we are
Yeah,
quitting from this.
right. That also includes, it also leads to the carpe diem philosophy, right?
Yeah,
Everywhere it's connecting towards that.
yes.
Okay.
So let's move on. And the first writer of this video session would be Far Fabian Lagerlöf. So that's a Swedish name. So the please don't mind the pronunciation of the names of the writers.
Yeah,
So
that's
he
a very
got
great disclaimer indeed.
he got the Nobel Prize in 1951. So he's a Swedish writer. And the next year following that, we have Francois Mauriac, a French dramatist and a novelist, who got the Nobel Prize in 1952. And following that, we have Sir Winston Churchill, and he is the former Prime Minister of United Kingdom. His lifespan runs up to like from 1874 till 1965, and he got the Nobel Award in the year 1953. He is actually known as a famous British statesman, military officer, and also a writer. But his writings usually deal with the political settings of his society. For example, he has written two memoirs, and like that was the only thing which was very famous about Sir Winston Churchill, and they are as follows. Like the first memoir would be the Second World War, so that's a six-volume memoir, and the second volume that contains four volumes. The title is A History of the English-Speaking Peoples. So he has written peoples in the title, like people itself is a plural thing, but he has added another S to indicate how people have different set of a mindset in their political uprisings in the United Kingdom. And he was recognized for his mastery of historical and biographical description, and also for his oratory skills. And it's because of that Churchill was received the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1953, and he was the only statesman who to get a Nobel Prize. So the Nobel awardees are generally people who are dedicated their life for writings, especially in literature. But Winston Churchill was the one who got a literary award, like especially for literary award, who is not much into literature for that matter. So
Wow,
shall we
that's
move on?
great. Yeah. Okay, the next writer is Ernest Miller Hemingway. So he got the Nobel Award in the year 1954. As we all know, the Americans are on the top in the Nobel Award list. So he was an American novelist and a short story writer. So one of the foremost authors of the era between the two world wars. So Hemingway, in his early works, depicted the lives of two types of people, and one type of people they consisted of men and women uh, deprived by World War One of faith in the moral values in which they had believed, and who lived with a cynical disregard for anything but their own emotional needs. The other type were men of simple character and primitive emotions, such as prize fighters and bullfighters. Also, the novel that established Hemingway's reputation is that The Sun Also Rises, which we are seeing on the screen, published in 1926. It is the story of a group of morally irresponsible Americans and Britons living in France and Spain. Also, the members of so-called lost generation of the post-World War One period. Then Hemingway's second very important novel is that A Farewell to Arms, published in 1929. It is the story of a deeply moving love affair in wartime Italy between an American officer in the Italian ambulance service and a British nurse. Then his novel To Have and Have Not, published in 1937, and his other play, The Fifth Column and the First 49 Stories, published in 1938, strongly condemned economic and political injustices. Then he also wrote The Snows of Kilimanjaro, where it were a part of the later works. Then Then other work like the For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1940. So that deals with the Spanish Civil War. He showed that the loss of liberty anywhere in the world is a warning that liberty is endangered everywhere. Then the last work published in his lifetime was Collected Poems in 1960. Then he later he committed suicide in Ketchum, Idaho in the year 1961, sadly. Then Hemingway's posthumously published work include A Movable Feast. So that was published in the year 1964. So that's it about Ernest Miller Hemingway.
So that was about the American writer Hemingway. So let's move to the next one. It is Haldor Kilijan Laxness, who is an Icelandic writer. He got the Nobel Prize in the year 1955. And following that, we have a Spanish poet, Juan Ramon Jimenez. So he got the Nobel Prize in 1956. So he's a Spanish poet. Shall we move on?
Yeah, we can.
The next prolific writer would be Albert Camus. So he got the Nobel Prize in the year 1957. And his lifespan would be starts from the year 1899 till 1961. So as I said before, he is a French Nobel laureate, and he's also a winning author, a journalist, and a philosopher. He actually contributed more on the philosophy of absurdism, like his view contributed to the rise of philosophy known as absurdism, and he also founded a group for international liaisons to denounce two ideologies found in both the USA and the USSR, like Soviet Union, the Union of Russia, and also the United States of America. And it is witnessed that he wrote in his essay, The Rebel, that his whole life was devoted to opposing the philosophy of nihilism while dwelling deeply into the individual freedom. So he also contributed his philosophies to the concept of nihilism as well as absurdism. And his first work would be The Strangers as a novel published in the year 1942. In the same year only, he also wrote his famous essay, a non-fiction, titled The Myth of Sisyphus. And in that essay only, Albert Camus introduced his philosophy of the absurdism. And he was the second youngest recipient at the age of 44. He got the Nobel Prize. Like Rudyard Kipling was at age of 42. He got, and he was the second one. Albert Camus was the second one to get a Nobel Prize in his younger age. That was like 40 is the younger, it seems, in Nobel laureates. And we can see that his other works include The Outsider, it was published in the year 1946, The Fall in 1956, and The Plague is also one of the famous novel of Albert Camus. It was published in the year 1947. And apart from that, two of his novels have published posthumously, titled as A Happy Death, published posthumously in 1971. The First Man is also a novel published posthumously in the year 1995. Apart from that, he has also written a short story collection titled Exile and the Kingdom, that was published in the year 1957, and that contains six stories. And he has also written non-fiction, as I said earlier, and he has also written plays. Like four important plays of Camus include The Misunderstanding in the year 1944, The State of Siege in the year 1948, The Just Assassins in 1949, The Possessed in the year 1959. So that play, The Possessed, is an adaptation from Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel Demons. So from that work, Albert Camus have adapted and written a play, it seems. So that was the literary career of Albert Camus in his lifetime. So moving on.
Yeah, we have in 1958 a German poet and a novelist, Boris Leonidovich Pasternak. Then in 1959 we have Salvatore Quasimodo. He was an Italian poet and a translator. Then in 1960 we have a French writer, Saint John Percy. Then in 1961 we have a Yugoslav writer, Ivo Andrić.
Yeah.
Then in 1962, we have the famous American writer John Steinbeck. So his first novel, Cup of Gold, published in 1929, it romanticizes the life and exploits of the famous 17th century Welsh pirate Sir Henry Morgan. Then other work like In Dubious Battle, published in 1936, then Of Mice and Men in 1937. So that's a tragic story of two itinerant farm laborers earning for a small farm of their own. Then Steinbeck's most widely known work is The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939. It also won the Pulitzer Prize in the year 1940. Then this Grapes of Wrath, it's a stark account of the George family from the impoverished Oklahoma Dust Bowl and their migration to California during the economic depression of the 1930s. The controversial novel received not only as realistic fiction but as a moving document of social protest. Is an American classic also. Then Steinbeck's other works include The Moon is Down in 1942, then Canary Row in 1945, The Wayward Bus, then East of Eden, the Winter of Our Discontent, then and America and Americans. That was in 1966, and his modernization of the Arthurian legends, like the Acts of King Arthur and his Noble Knights, that was published posthumously in the year 1976. So, and also there was a movie adaptation of his work, The Forgotten Village, that was published in the year 1941. Yeah, that's it about John Steinbeck.
Yeah, so he's a very powerful writer of America. So moving
Yeah.
on, we have Yorgos Seppris, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1963. So he's a Greek poet and a Dutch diplomat. Next would be Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous French philosopher, screenwriter, playwright, novelist, political activist, biographer, and a literary critic. So he's a very big literary figure in French philosophy, we can say like that. He got the Nobel Prize in the year 1964. He was one of the key figures in the philosophy of existentialism and phenomenology, and he is also a leading figure in the 20th century of French philosophy and Marxism for that matter. And it looks like he had an open relationship with the feminist theorist Simone de Beauvoir. So, like, they both also shared about their own philosophies in their works. Moving on, his best known Hugh Claus, the work, the name is Hugh Claus in French. Sorry for the mispronunciation, and it is translated into English as "No Exit." That contains the famous line, "Hell is other people." So apart from that, he has also written many fictional works. So in that, his major works of fiction would include The Road to Freedom, a trilogy that contains the works like The Age of Reason, 1945, The Reprise, 1945, Troubled Sleep in 1949. And he's also like Sartre have also given like he has written preface to Franz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. Like we all know Franz Fanon have written the work essay work titled The Wretched of the Earth. So for that work, it is Sartre who has written preface. And moving on, we have Clive James who have attacked Sartre's philosophy. Like he was attacking his philosophical ideas, and he also criticized his works and claiming it as all a pose. That was a statement given by Clive James towards Sartre's philosophy. And his first work include Nausea, which was published in the year 1938. And Being a Nothingness is an essay written by Jean-Paul Sartre in the year 1943. The Flies is also an important work of Sartre. It was published in the same year 1943. And he has also written autobiographical collections. The famous would include The Words in the year 1964, War Diaries, Notebooks from a Phony War. So that is also an autobiography written by Sartre. And his idea of existentialism and phenomenology was like it can be find like it can be found in his critical works or essay works. So one such work which was dealt with the concept existentialism is titled as Existentialism is Humanism. So that was published in the year 1946. So that is also an important essay work of Sartre. And this is about the literary career of Jean-Paul Sartre in detail. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, next we have in 1965 a Russian writer, Mikhail Sholokov. Then in 1966 we have an Israeli writer, Shmuel Adnan, and German-Swedish writer, Nelly Sachs. Then in 1967 we have a Latin American writer, I guess, yeah, Miguel Angel Asturias. Then, as we all know, he was a former member of the Congress of Guatemala and a writer. He was born in Guatemala City in the year 1899 and he died in 1974. His famous works include Legends of Guatemala in the year 1930. So that was a collection of stories based on Mayan legends. Then his other works like The President in the year 1946. Also the famous Banana trilogy that contains Strong Wind, The Green Pope, The Eyes of the Interred. Also some other works like Hombre de Maíz. I think he wrote in his own language that considered his masterpiece. This novel explores the struggles of indigenous people. So he mostly wrote about the Mayan culture and certain indigenous people of that particular place where he's living. Also, some other works that was also famous, and the awards like International Lenin Peace Prize that was also given to him in the year 1966. So that's it about Asturias.
Yeah, so moving on, we have a Japanese writer, Yasunari Kawabata, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1968. So the writer belongs to Japan and a famous novelist and the short story writer for that matter. And the next Nobel laureate would be Samuel Beckett, the most famous of all. He got the Nobel Prize in the year 1969. So Samuel Beckett was an Irish avant-garde novelist, a playwright, a theatre director, and a poet. He lived in Paris and he wrote both in English as well as in French. And he is considered as one of the last modernists and the first post-modernist writer. And he's also considered as one of the key writers in what Martin Esslin coined the term the theatre of absurd. So Beckett is also important, and he's also associated with absurdism, as he like mainly dealt with the absurd plays. So he is known for his famous dramatic works, novels, short prose, non-fiction, poetry collection, and even long works. Long works in the sense it can be like an anthology or something like that. And his works often deals with a bleak, tragic, and comic outlook on human existence. Like it is also associated with black comedy and also gallows humor. And he was the only Nobel laureate to have an entry in Wisden Cricketer Almanac, the Bible of Cricket. And it seems that Becker studied French, Italian, and English in Trinity College at Dublin from the year 1923 to 1927. So, in the year 1929, Becker published his first work, a critical essay titled Dante Bruno Vico Joyce. So, that defends James Joyce's works and methods of James Joyce when he was a work Samuel Becker was very much influenced by James Joyce, so we can see his influences on his work also. And we can say that the first work of Samuel Beckett would be the novel titled Murphy in the year 1938. So that was his first work. And apart from that, he has also written famous plays like On Affront Godo. So that was written in French, published in the year 1952 and performed in 1953. And that was translated in English as Waiting for Godot, published in the year 1954, performed in the year 1955. So here they have mentioned 1952 that actually the date of the French publication. And apart from that play, he has also written Crab's Last Day, first performed in 1958, Happy Days, first performed in 1961, That Time, first performed in 1976, Catastrophe, first performed in 1982, What Where, first performed in 1983. And he has also written Endgame in the year 1957. And he's also known for writing trilogies. Like he has written the fictional works, and apart from that, his most famous fictional work would be like Poemen trilogy that includes Molly 1951, Malondice 1958, The Unnameable in 1960. So these are the novels written by Samuel Beckett, and his short prose include Worst Word Ho. Like it is not a best word or east word; it is worst word Ho in the year 1983. So that's a short prose written by Samuel Beckett. And non-fiction by Samuel Beckett will include Proust in 1931. So that was about the life of Marcel Proust. So that was about actually a critical study of the French author Marcel Proust. So that he published in the year 1931. And he's also written three dialogues. So that's a collaborative work of Samuel Beckett. He wrote with Georges Darkfleet and Jack Putnam in the year 1949. And his poetry collection like Echoes Bone and Other Precipitates in 1935. What is the Word in 1989. And his long works include Negro and Anthology in the year 1934, Anthology of Mexican Poems 1958. So these are the literary works of Samuel Beckett, and he's also a very powerful writer, and he also associated with French Resistance and Renaissance of German literature. So moving on,
Okay, that's a lot of information by from Samuel Beckett.
yeah,
Next, we have in 1970 a Russian writer, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Okay.
yeah,
Next,
that's a Russian name. We can't do
yeah,
anything with that.
right. Next, in the year 1971, we have another native Latin American writer, mostly poet, Pablo Neruda. So he was born with a different name like Ricardo Eliezer Neftali Reyes Bosalato. So that was a very huge name. Then later he used this pen name or pseudonym named Pablo Neruda to shield his work from his disapproving father. So as we all know, many women writers used to shield their identity from the society or outside world, but even a male wanted to do this. That was a pathetic condition towards his family. He was born on Chile, in that place, on the year 1904. So started writing poetry at a very young age, adopting this pseudonym. Then he published his first book of poems in the year 1923, named Book of Twilight. That was originally published in his own mother tongue, named Crepusculario. Then he gained the international recognition with his work 20 Love Poems and A Song of Despair in the year 1929. So his 20 Love Poems is often compared with Shakespeare's love sonnets. So with that sonnet, they used to compare his work, his 20 love poems. That was we can find many similarities between them, their writings. Then he published another work like The Heights of Machu Picchu in the year 1943. Then he also wrote Canto General, uh, then Extravagaria, Memoirs, also The Residents of the Earth, then Odes to Common Things. Ode to Common Things, that was a different kind of title. Where we have known the Ode to Nightingale or Ode to West Wind, like that. But this Ode to Common Things, that's very different. His poetry for general reflected his deep connection to nature. So he mostly shows that in his poetry, his passion for social justice, and also his experience with love and loss. Also, he also had some political views as he was a very staunch communist. He actively supported leftist causes and he criticized social inequalities. So, in his poetry, particularly in Canto General, we can find his political views. So, that Canto General is an epic poem chronicling the history of Latin America generally. And he also faced persecution for his leftist ideals, forcing him into the exile for a long period. He also awarded this Nobel Prize later. So uh, that generally gained him uh, certain motivation to do later. Also, his works continue to inspire readers worldwide, even now, with their vivid imagery, then emotional depth, and certain universal themes, not only for a uh, particular country or particular set of people, but it contains the universal theme generally. Yeah, that's it about Pablo Neruda.
Yeah, so that was a brief description about his lifetime and his literary career. So
Yeah,
moving on, so we have Heinrich Boll, a German writer who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1972. The next would be Patrick Victor Martingale White, or shortly known as Patrick White, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1973. So his lifespan ranges from 1912 to 1990. So he is an Australian writer who is widely regarded as one of the most important English language novelists of the 20th century. And it looks like he was the first Australian to be awarded this Nobel Prize in Literature. And from 1935 till his death, he published 12 novels, 3 short stories, and 8 plays. And it just seems that White's fiction employs humor, florid prose shifting, narrative vintage point, and also he used stream of consciousness techniques in his work. And he wrote a collection of poetry titled The Ploughman and Other Poems. And following that, he wrote a play named Bread and Butter Woman. So these are his pioneering works in his literary career. Like in the year 1935, he might have started writing this poetry collection and the play. And the first famous novel of Patrick White is titled Happy Valley, a novel which was published in the year 1939, and he won the 1941 Australian Literature Society Gold Medal. So he dedicated this novel to the artist Roy de Maistre. So in 1936, actually, Patrick White met the painter Roy de Maistre, like 18 years his senior, and he became an important influence in the life of Patrick White, and because of that, he even dedicated this novel to the painter. And he also like he got his fame with his works like The Aunt's Story, which was published in the year 1948, and that was about middle-aged woman who travels to France after her mother's death and then to America. So that was about a woman's story. So that brought a fame to Patrick White, and along with that, The Tree of Man, which was published in the year 1955, that was also a very famous work for Patrick White. And between these literary publications, he wrote The Living and the Dead in the year 1941, and that was his second published book set in 1930 London. So that was about World War II, and he was dealing with that with the locations of UK and USA. And moving on, we have the most important work of Patrick White. It is titled Was, that was published in the year 1957. That was actually based upon the life of a 19th century Prussian explorer and naturalist Ludwig Leitfart, who disappeared while going on an expedition into an Australian outback. So that was about a naturalist, and we can see the same set of biographical elements of Ludwig Leitfart in this novel also, and it was very famous for Patrick White's literary career. And following that, he also wrote Riders in the Chariot in the year 1961, and that won Miles Franklin Award of 1961, and he also won 1965 Gold Medal of the Australian Literature Society. So this novel also got two prizes for Patrick White and very famous work of him. Moving on, we have The Solid Mandela, which was published in the year 1966. That was also a very famous work of Patrick White. The Vivisector, which was published in the year 1970. That was about fictional painter Herschel Duffel. That was about a fictional painter. So it looks like painting has made a very big influence on the life of Patrick White. So that's why he has given a lot of importance to painters and their paintings. So after the publication of the Vivisector, he also wrote the Twin Born Affair. So that was actually shortlisted for Booker Prize, and he announced that it was his last novel. And after writing the novel The Twin Born Affair, he moved on to write radio plays. And in 1981, he published his autobiography, Flaws in the Glass. So that was his autobiographical work. It was about his self-portrayal of how his fame was there and how his homosexuality and his refusal to accept the Nobel Prize personally. So these things, we can see these things in the autobiographical work, Flaws in the Glass. And in 1986, Patrick released his last novel, Memoirs of Many in One. It was actually published under the pen name Alex Xenophon Demir Gianfrey. That was his pen name. Like he published his work in the pen name, but he edited the work in his real name, Patrick White. So that was a interesting fact I found in White's career. And it looks like in 1946, The Was, a famous novel written by him, was turned into an opera with music by Richard Mille, and a libretto was adapted on the same content by David Malou. So that was also one of the facts I found when I was searching for Patrick White's literary career. Apart from that, he has also written short story collections, as I had mentioned before. The three short story collections are The Burnt Ones, 1964, The Cocktoes, 1974, Three Uneasy Pieces, 1987. So these are his most important literary works in his career. So moving on.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, in 1974 we have Swedish writers like Ivan Johnson, then Harry Martinson. Then in 1975 we have an Italian writer Eugenio Montiel. Then in 1976 we have Saul Bellow, an American writer again. So Saul Bellow, his novels usually depict the struggle of individuals to preserve their personal identities in an indifferent society. So during the war, he also published his first novel, The Dangling Man, in the year 1944, which deals with the anxiety and discomfort of a young man waiting to be drafted in wartime. Then his next book was The Victim, published in 1947. So after winning a Guggenheim Fellowship, Saul Bellow lived for a time in Europe, where he wrote most of his novel, like The Adventures of Augie March, in the year 1953. That also won National Booker Award in the year 1954. So that was a long, loosely structured narrative with a picaresque hero. The novel often goes with a vivid, often humorous picture of Jewish life in Chicago and a young man's search for identity. Also, modern humanity threatened with loss of identity, but not destroyed in spirit, is the theme of his other work, Seize the Day, in the year 1956. And Henderson, the Rain King, in the year 1959. So that was about a man whose life is falling apart around him, and an account of an American millionaire's search for peace and self-knowledge. So that was also Henderson and the Rain King for us. Then we have Herzog in the year 1964, that also won National Book Award in the year 1965. So that's a story of a university professor who writes letters to the world at large in an attempt to correct personal and universal injustices. Then we have Mr. Samless Planet in the year 1970. So that all, again, it won also the National Book Award in the year 1971. So the hero of this work is an aged Jewish intellectual, a refugee from Nazi Germany living in New York City. As the embodiment of old European values, Samler is dismayed by contemporary American life, but he manages to maintain his own perspective. Then he received the Pulitzer Prize in the year 1976 for in fiction for his novel Humboldt's Gift in the year 1975, that was got published, that concerns the relationship between an author and a poet. Then, 3 months later, he published Dean's December in the year 1982, in which he continued his analysis of contemporary culture. Then, To Jerusalem and Back in the year 1976. That's a reflective study of a visit Bellow made to Israel. Then, More Die of Heartbreak in the year 1987. That's a novel in which he returned to Midwestern settings. And also an essay collection, It All Adds Up, published in the year 1994. Then we have The Actual, 1997. That's a novella about a high school relationship taken up again after many years. Then we have Ravelstein in the year 2000. Uh, so that was about a university professor and his friendship with his own biographer is based on the life of his Saul Bellows' own friend Alan Bloom. So Alan Bloom was a prominent American intellectual. So we can find many university as a setting in his work. Like that's also a genre, right?
Yeah,
Like, is it campus novels? Yeah,
yeah,
campus
it's campus
novels.
novels.
It comes under that. So he also wrote certain works in comes under campus novels. So that's it about him.
Yeah, this man have written a lot of books. You have to read everything of this.
Yeah, correct.
So moving on, we have Vincente Alexandre, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1977 as Spanish poet. And in 1978, we have the Polish American writer Isaac Bashevis Singer. And then,
Yeah, we have 1979 a Greek poet Odysseus Elitis. Then in 1980 we have a Polish American writer Czesław Milos. Then in 1981 a German dramatist and novelist Elias Canetti.
yeah, and in 1982, we have Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So the full name would be like Gabriel Jose de la Concordia Garcia Marquez. So he's a Colombian writer, short story writer, screenwriter, a journalist, and also a novelist for that matter. And his time span would include like from 1927 to 2014. And many people usually call him as Gabo or Gabito. So that was his nickname. And he's considered as one of the best Spanish language author. And he's famously known for three of his novels, which we are going to deal with, so, with this slide. And most of his works set in a fictional village called Mackendo. So that was the fictional city of Marquez, and he explores on the theme of solitude in this village. Like he was dealing with that also. And his first work is titled as Leaf Storm. That is the first novella of Marquez, and he took 7 years to find a publisher to publish this novella. And all the events of the novella take place in one room during a half-hour period on Wednesday, 12th September 1928. So that was about like it was only a half a day. The time span of the novella would be like half a day time scenario. And moving on, his work In Evil Heart was published in the year 1962. So that was actually originally entitled as This Town of Shit or This Shitty Town. So that was the original title, but it was changed into In Evil Heart, and the story takes place in the fictional Colombian village. And the most famous work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez would be 100 Years of Solitude. It was published in the year 1967, and that is actually a multi-generational story of a Buendia family. The patriarch of the family is Jose Arcadio Buendia. So he was the one who found this town Mackendo. So that was like through this character only Marquez introduced the town Mackendo. And I think there is the stories of 7 generations of Buendia family in the town of Mackendo. And I think we have a series of series under the title 100 Years of Solitude in Netflix, I guess, and it's very nice to watch.
Yeah, it's really very nice. The visuals, everything.
Yeah, yeah, it is like they are literally translating the work into an adaptation. It seems it was like that.
Yeah,
So the next important work of Marquez is the A- the Autumn of the Patriarch in the year 1975. Love in the Time of Cholera is also published in the year 1985, and all these three works are the most famous of Marquez. And apart from that, he has also written The General in His Labyrinth in the year 1989, Chronicles of the Death Foretold in the year 1981. So that is actually a recreation of a murder that took place in Colombia in the year 1951. So that was about like a real incident. It is based on a real incident, which deals with the murder of Santiago Santiago Nazar. So that was a person who involved with the murder, and his work of Love and Other Demons is also an important work of Garcia Marquez, which was published in the year 1994. And he has written Memoirs of My Melancholy Wars in the year 2004. That is also a novella. And he has written a non-fictional book titled News of Kidnapping, which was published in the year 1996. And he is concept magical realism. So it is like the magical realism was first used by a German art critic Franz Roh in the year 1925, but it is Marquez who popularized that. Like magical realism usually deals with some sort of reality with supernatural elements. And Marquez was one of the Latin American writers who popularized this concept. And along with that, we have some chief exponents like Salman Rushdie, Alice Hoffman, who popularized this concept of magical realism. And he was the first Colombian, like Gigi Marquez was the first Colombian to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And his acceptance speech of Nobel Prize, which was it was also published as a essay titled "The Solitude of Latin America." So that was also one of the facts of Garcia Marquez, and he has also written a three-volume autobiography in the year 2002, published as Vivir para Contrala. So that was the autobiography published by Garcia Marquez in his lifetime. So that was about this writer. So moving on.
yeah, what a man he was.
Yeah,
Yeah, in 1983, we have William Golding. So, he was a British novelist and a famous playwright. And he is most famous for his debut novel, Lord of the Flies, published in the year 1954. Also, he was an Oxford scholar, Oxford educated. So, he studied science before switching to English literature. So, that was a fact about him. So, his famous work, Lord of the Flies, that explores the dark side of human nature through a group of British boys stranded on a deserted island who descended into savagery later. There was a question in that work like, what are we, humans or animals or savages? So, Piggy asked this question in that work, that encapsulating the central theme of the novel, which is the struggle between human nature and the primal instincts that can lead to savagery. So then we have The Inheritors in the year 1955, then Pincha Martin in the year 1956, also Free Fall in the year 1959, then Darkness Visible in the year 1979. Also, he wrote a trilogy, C trilogy contains Rites of Passage, Close Quarters, Fire Down Below. Also, he won the Booker Prize in the year 1980 for Rites of Passage. Then he was awarded knighthood in the year 1988 for his very great services to literature. Also, he was a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. Then in 2008, the Times, the magazine, ranked him third on the list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. So that was a great honor to him. Then he died in the year 2014 in Cornwall. So that's it about Golding.
yeah. So it was nice about his literary career. So
Yeah.
then we have Jaroslav Seifert, a Crest writer who got Nobel Prize in the year 1984. Claude Simon, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1985, belongs to French literature. Moving on, we have Ole Soyinka, who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1986. So Soyinka is a Nigerian playwright and a poet, and he is still a living writer. He was born in the year 1934, and he is the first African to be honored with this award. And Soyinka was born in Yoruba family, and he followed the Yoruba religious traditions. And he also wrote about his childhood in his memoir, Ake, the Years of Childhood. Like he was the play reader at the Royal Theatre. So that was a fact about Soyinka in his life. The first work of Soyinka would be The Swamp Dwellers. It's a play published in the year 1958, and followed by another play, like a famous play of Soyinka would be The Lion and the Jewel, published in the year 1959. So that's a comedy written by Soyinka. And The Invention was his first work. The Invention. So that was the first work which was produced at Royal Court Theatre in the year 1957. That was his first work in his literary career, but it was like produced in theatrical, like it might be staged than instead of published, it might be staged in Royal Court Theatre. And moving on, we have his A Dance of the Forest, published in the year 1960, and it received a biting criticism of Nigeria's political elite. And this play also won as the official play for Nigerian Independence Day in the year 1960. And it seems that Soyinka was imprisoned for 22 months during the civil war between the federal government and the Biafrans. Like after 1969 only he was released. Before that he was imprisoned it seems. And in 1976 he published his poetry collection Ogun Abibi Man. And in the same year he also published his essay collection titled Myth, Literature and the African World. So in after his release he published a poetry collection and an essay collection it seems. And he also found a theatrical group called the Guerrilla Unit, and for that he wrote an essay titled Towards a True Theatre. So that was published in the year 1962. And in 2014 he got International Humanist Award, and he also stated a fact, I quote, "A tiger does not proclaim its tigritude before it strikes." So that was his quote. And he was inspired from the term negritude to coin the term tigritude. So negritude was coined by M.A. Cesare and Leopold Sengar, and he took that term and he created a term tigritude for his religious practices and also for his beliefs. And apart from these works, he also wrote a political satire titled Kongi's Harvest in the year 1965, and that was about how a dictator of African developing country was trying the whole nation to modernize them. The leader was trying to westernize the natives of Africa. And he has also written a play, The Road, which was published in the year 1965, and that's a very complex play because it combines comedy and tragedy, and it also shows some kind sort of satirical and spiritual altitude of the dramatist. Of the dramatist would be Soyinka. So you can see different concepts and different beliefs Soyinka had through this play, The Road, which was published in the year 1965. And he also wrote a play based on the real incident that took place in Africa or Nigeria, especially during the British colonial rule. And the title of the play would be Death and the King's Horseman, published in the year 1975. So this was the dramatic career of Soyinka. And apart from that, he has also written some sort of plays that deals with Christian religion practices, and he has written two plays for that. The first one would be The Trial of Brother Zero. Here, Zero, the spelling would be Jero. The Trial of Brother Zero. So that's about a prophet who practices Christianity. And the sequel to that, he wrote Zero Metamorphosis. So that's a sequel to The Trial of Brother Zero. And he has also written two memoirs. The Man Died in the year 1971, Ake in the year 1981. So these are the memoirs of Soyinka, and I have mentioned the plays written by Soyinka, and he has also written a novel titled The Interpreters in the year 1964 he published. So that was the only novel written by Soyinka. So this is the literary career of Mulay Soyinka, a Nobel Laureate of 1982.
Okay, that's great. Next, we have in 1987 an American writer, Joseph Brodsky. Then in 1988, we have an Egyptian writer, Naguib Mahfouz. Then in 1989, we have a Spanish writer, Camilo Jose Sila.
Yeah,
Then in 1990, we have Octavio Paz, who hailed from Mexico City in the year 1914. Then actually his early interest in literature was due to his grandfather. So he was also a novelist and intellectual. So that greatly influenced him, we can say. He was also exposed to various intellectual and artistic movements, including Marxism, Surrealism, then existentialism. Then also his famous major works like The Labyrinth of Solitude, that was his seminal essay, exploring the Mexican identity, history, and culture. Then we have Luna Silvestre poems, then Configuration, which is a poetry collection, Then we have Sunstone, that's a long, complex poem considered one of his masterpieces also, that explores themes of love, time, and human connection. He also edited Anthology of Mexican Poetry in the year 1985. Then White, that was published in the year 1967. It's a complex experimental poem that explores the relationship between language, perception, and reality. He also wrote another poetry collection like Salamander in the year 1962, which reflect his interest in Eastern philosophies and mysticism. Actually, generally, his work considered it contains the intellectual depth, lyrical beauty, then exploration of complex philosophical and existential questions. We already know that he often wrote about love, desire, history, then human condition. He employs a rich imagery, symbolism, and many figurative languages. He won Miguel de Cervantes Prize in the year 1981. So that was a very prestigious literary award in the Spanish language. Then also the Newstead International Prize for Literature in the year 1982. Also, National Prize for Arts and Sciences. That was Mexico's highest recognition for contributions to arts and sciences. So he won these many awards. Yeah, then he died in Mexico City itself in the year 1998.
Yeah, that was about Octavia Paz. So moving on, we have Nadine Gordimer. So she's a South African writer. Was born in the year 1923 and died in the year 2014. And she received the Nobel Prize in the year 1991. And like she was more of an activist than writer, we can say, because she fought for the people who belonged in the South Africa or Africa for that matter, and she was voicing for apartheid and anti-apartheid movements. Like she was much concentrated on the apartheid and apartheid movement, and she was also writing about anti-apartheid movement also, and she was very active in that. And her first work would be The Lying Days. Like that's a novel written by Nadine Gordimer. And the first short story collection would include Face to Face, which was published in the year 1949. And The Lying Days is the first work which was published in the year 1953. That was her first published novel. And following that, we have The Conservationist. That was that was published in the year 1954, and she received a very uh, much fame for that novel. And following that, we have Berger's Daughter, which was published in the year 1979. And this novel was banned because of its apartheid element. And after a while, it was again released from the ban. And her most famous work would be Julian's People, published in the year 1981. And that novel that novel talks about the South African Revolution, how the bloody South African Revolution in which white people are hunted and murdered after blacks revolt against the apartheid government. So we can see some sort of brutal themes like violence, race hatred, and also some violent war among the state as well. And also, The House Gun was the Gordimer's second post-apartheid novel, and that was published in the year 1998. And her most famous work would also include My Son Story, which was published in the year 1990. And The Pickup is a award-winning novel which was published in the year 2002, and that deals with the issues of displacement, alienation, immigration, class and economic power, religious faith, and it deals with all these sort of themes. And Get a Life is also one of the novels which she wrote in the year 2005 after the death of her longtime spouse, Reinhold Cashier. So that is about story of a man undergoing treatment for a life-threatening disease. Like we can see some sort of autobiographical elements of Gordimer in this novel, along with some sort of explanation of political themes as well. And it is noticed that Gordimer has occasionally given voice to Jewish characters as well, like giving importance to Jews rituals, and also she was dealing with the Jewish themes in her work, and she has received the Nobel Prize in the year 1991. Like she was also nominated for the Nobel Prize in the year 1972 and 1973, but she eventually got it in the year 1991, it seems. So she's a long runner for this Nobel Prize, it seems. Yeah.
Wow, that's
So,
great.
so
Hmm.
moving on.
Yeah, in 1992, we have a St. Lucian poet and playwright Derek Walcott. So, he was born in St. Lucia in the year 1930. His family had English, Dutch, and African ancestry. So, he have many ancestry, it seems, reflecting the complex colonial history of the of his works. His mother was a teacher who instilled in him a love for arts, particularly poetry. Also, his major works like Dream on Monkey Mountain and Other Plays in the year 1970, In a Green Night, that's a poem, collection of poems published in 1962. Then Dream on Monkey Mountain that mostly explores the themes of identity, colonialism. Then we have Omeros in the year 1990. It's an epic poem that retells the stories of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey in a Caribbean setting, considered by many to be his masterpiece. Then we have Haitian Trilogy in the year 2001 that contains Henry Christophe, then Drums and Colors, The Haitian Earth. Then also we have a collection of poems by him which is named The Bounty in the year 1997 that reflect on his Caribbean home and the death of his mother. So then Teopolo's Hound in the year 2000, a poetic biography of the West Indian born French painter Camilo Pissarro. So he also wrote the biography about a poet. His generally the style he used is that it often grapples with the issue of identity, colonialism, and even the legacy of slavery. He also won T.S. Eliot Prize in the year 2011 for his poetry collection White Egrets. Also, MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, that was a prestigious award recognizing individuals who have shown exceptional creativity. Then also Queen's Medal for Poetry. It's a British award given for excellence in poetry. Also, he was not only a writer, he was also a talented painter, and his artworks often complemented like his writings, it seems. He was also a professor for literature at Boston University, that was a famous university, for many years, it seems. So yeah, that's it about him. Derek Walcott.
Yeah. So the next writer is Toni Morrison, and she got the Nobel Award in the year 1993. And she also won Pulitzer Prize and American Book Award too. So like she's a very important American novelist, editor, and a professor. And her novels are known for their epic themes, vivid dialogues, and rich detailed characters. Like all her novels are famous. Like every novel she has written is famous, and she's best known for all her novels. Also, the first novel is *The Bluest Sky*, published in the year 1970. So that was the best known novel of Morrison, and she was talking about the struggles dealt with and faced by black people. And following that, she has written *Sula* in the year 1923. So that was also about the oppression of black people received by black people. And the next novel she wrote was *Song of Solomon* in the year 1977. And this novel also has some sort of magical realism, which can be seen in her the next novel, *Beloved* in the year 1987. So *Beloved* and *Song of Solomon* both novel has some elements of magical realism. And in between the publications of *Song of Solomon* and *Beloved*, she published *Star Baby*, which was published in the year 1981. So that was also a famous work of Toni Morrison. And at the age of 12, she became a Catholic and received the baptized name Anthony, which later became the basis for her nickname Toni. And in 2012, she got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And she also played a vital role in bringing black literature into mainstream. And she edited books written by authors like Henry Wimmer, Tony Cade Bambara, Angela Davis, Gail Jones. So all these writers' works, Toni Morrison have edited that. And her novel Sula, which I mentioned it before, was nominated for National Book Award. And her Song of Solomon reclaimed national attention. And it seems like all her books have been selected as Book of Month Club in libraries, it seems. And Song of Solomon also won a National Book Critics Circle Award. And it seems that Morrison lecture, like she has given lectures also, and one of her lectures that entitled as The Future of Time, Literature and Dimness Expectations. That was about aphorism and how time has no future in it, like time is futureless. So she was talking about how time will be evolved in the upcoming years. So she was talking about that, and that was given as a lecture, and it was also published as a essay. And she has also written novels like she has written a trilogy titled Dante's Trilogy. The novels are Beloved in 1987, Jazz in 1992, so that's a historical novel. Paradise is published in the year 1997. So these are three novels comes under the Dante's Trilogy. And apart from that, in 2003, she has written Love, A Mercy in 2008, Home in 2012. So that novel was written by Toni Morrison when her younger son Slave dies. So that novel was dedicated to her younger son Slave. The novel title is Home, which was published in the year 2012. And in 2015, she has written God Help the Child. And she's also known for writing libretto or musicals titled Margaret Garner in the year 2005. She has also written short fiction titled Recitative, published in the year 1983. And she has also written two famous plays titled Dreaming Eminent in 1986, Desdemona in 2011. So these are the literary works of Toni Morrison and her literary career, which she maintained till her death. So this was about Toni Morrison. Moving on.
Yeah. Yeah, in 1994 we have a Japanese writer Genzaburo O. Then in 1995 we have Seamus Heaney. Yeah, of course. He was born on Londonderry, Northern Ireland. He grew up on farm and attended St. Colum's College in Derry. He studied literature at Queen's University, Belfast. His major works include Death of a Naturalist in the year 1996. That was his first major collection of poems exploring rural life and childhood experiences. Then we have Beowulf, the translation of Beowulf in the year 1999. So Beowulf was, as we all know, it was a very famous poem in the Old English poetry, very epic poem we can say. Then Spiritual Level in the year 1996, also Door into the Dark in the year 1969, and Wintering Out in the year 1972, North that examines history of violence and conflict in Ireland in the year 1975. Then we have Bog poems from North collection like Bog Queen, The Grobble Man, then Punishment, then Strange Fruit. Also the Hall Lantern, that's a collection of poems by him in the year 1987. Then Seeing Things in the year 1991, The Spirit Level in 1996, then Electric Light in the year 2001, then District and Circle. That was his final collection of poems exploring themes of place, identity, and mortality, published in the year 2006. So he is generally considered one of the most important poets of the 20th century. He also won awards like E.M. Forster Award in 1975, also Irish Book Awards Lifetime Achievement Award in 2005, also Geoffrey Faber Memorial Prize in 1968. Also others include he was also a member of the Irish Arts Council. He was a lecturer at Queen's University where he studied in Belfast, and later he taught at Harvard University. So that's it about Seamus Heaney.
Yeah. The next will include Wisława Szymborska, a Polish poet who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1996. Dario Fo, an Italian playwright, got the Nobel Prize in 1997. Jose Saramago, a Portugal writer who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1998. Gunter Grass, a German writer who got the Nobel Prize in the year 1999. Gao Xinjian, a Chinese-French novelist, received the Nobel Prize in the year 2000. Yeah,
Yeah, we have covered a period of over 50 years in this video. So
yeah,
with this, let's complete the video.
yes.
We'll cover
Let's,
the next 25 years, I guess, 24 years on our next video.
yeah, sure.
Okay,
Until
then
then,
with Anyo.
you know,
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our video. Thank you.
yeah, please